Hey everyone, just checking here. Can people hear me okay? See if I can get somebody drop into the chat here for a bit of a sound check. Yes, wonderful. Thank you. So welcome everyone. I'm Das Rush. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Valence. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about how an AI coach can change how we manage and performance reviews, but even more broadly than that, how we can really improve how we manage performance. I'd like to kind of bring up here now onto the stage some of our guests. So we have Brian Sullivan and Natalie Tincher from Delta, and Kelson Fernandez from Experian today, who will be sharing a little bit about their journey with performance review, performance management, and AI coaching. And Brian, Natalie, and Kelson, I'd actually love to have each of you just do kind of a quick one-liner introduction. We'll get into deeper introductions for each of you later, but just one line on kind of what your role is and what you're kind of bringing to this conversation today. And for those of you in the audience, as we do that, I see people active in the chat. The more active the chat, the better the conversations tend to be. So please drop in your name, where you're calling from, and if there's anything that you have that's a really big question or a topic that you want to make sure we hit, drop it in there and we'll be folding as many of those into the conversation, and we'll have some time at the end as well. So with that, Brian, can we start with you? What's your role at Delta and kind of what are you bringing to the conversation today?
Sure. Hi, everybody. And no pressure starting with what I'm bringing to the conversation. Hopefully something of value to everybody here. I'm the Director of Talent and Performance at Delta. I've been at Delta for about 7 years, and I've been working in this field for, believe it or not, getting closer to 20 years now. So really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about a lot of the lessons learned and the process that we've followed to start bringing in AI coaching for performance management and the reasons why. Like, why did we think it was the right time to start doing that within Delta? So thanks.
Thanks, Brian. And Natalie, how about you?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Tincher. I work on Brian's team, so that makes my introduction a little bit easier. And specifically, what is most relevant to our conversation today is I lead our performance management process across Delta and have partnered really closely with the whole Valence team over the past year plus now as we started to pilot Nadia across the business, specifically related to our performance management process. So super excited to be here today, learn from each other, and answer any questions that you might have in the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. And finally, Kelson, who I know you're calling in from the UK, so extra special thanks for doing this one at the end of the day. But tell us a little about your role at Experian.
Thank you, Des. I'm Kelson. I'm currently the Global Head of Performance Enablement at Experian. I joined Experian 11 years ago in Brazil. I was born in Brazil and I moved to the UK 4 years ago. And I think what I bring to the conversation is like we've been on this journey to evolve the way we approach this amazing topic that is organizational and individual performance. So I think I can bring some contribution in terms of what we are learning during this journey and all sorts of things related to how we evolve that topic. Yeah.
Well, Brian, Natalie, Kelson, thank you so much for being here. For those of you in the audience, I'm going to do just a little bit of an intro to the topic here because I think it's really important to understand kind of the high level of how we think about AI coaching for performance management. But then most of this is really going to be a chance to hear the stories that Natalie, Brian, and Kelson have to share. So we'll be digging into those. But I wanted to kind of start by, this topic. I think right now, a lot of people, when they hear AI and performance, what they're really thinking about is like, how can we automate performance reviews? Make that a little bit faster or less painful or more efficient. But what I really want to make sure we do in this conversation is go bigger than just automating performance reviews, because I think what we've really seen at Valence, and especially with stories like Experian and Delta, is that this is it's not just an opportunity to make performance reviews less painful and goal setting, a little bit clearer. It's also really an opportunity to move performance from like a snapshots where you get a few frozen moments that you're touching in a given calendar year to it being continuous where you're managing performance, alignment, and direction. So with that in mind, let's see if I can click the slide. Here we go. I want to talk a little bit about the problem, and I think it's kind of one we all know. we all dread generally, or at least I know I have in my 15 plus years of working, that we dread performance reviews. We're often like, for me, it's like I'm often really busy. I'm trying to cram it in as I have like a bunch of tasks to do. And so I'm more focused on just getting them done sometimes than giving the really quality feedback that actually helps people improve. And then, going into the feedback conversations, they're difficult. Sometimes they can be hard conversations. They can involve conflict or sensitive emotions. And there's often not as much support as we want to be giving to our managers and our team leads through that process. Now, what I think we've all seen as good news over the last couple of years is that AI is amazing at making performance reviews better. It can synthesize and summarize information. And in a lot of ways, it can address the kind of pain points of performance reviews. And so it's kind of not surprising. I know for me, I hear about like a new AI performance review tool every week, it feels like. And those tools, to be kind of honest, I think they all work. They all make reviews faster, better, they save us time. And I think in 2025, none of us should be writing reviews without the help of AI. But what we really want to focus on here is like, why do we do reviews at all? And I think this is something we've kind of lost sight of. And so I put one of my favorite quotes on this slide from Peter Sang, who's an MIT lecturer on organizational learning. And one of his quotes is like, the only sustainable competitive advantage in business is our ability to learn faster than the competition. And so the reason that I think we all do these performance reviews as organizations is to be able to learn and grow faster. But right now we kind of have a broken loop. We do reviews, we maybe have mid-year check-ins, we do our goal setting, but what we haven't done is close the loop and bring all of that into the flow of day-to-day work. And so that's where I kind of think Peter's actually only partially right, because the competitive advantage isn't just learning faster than our competitors, it's going to be how well we can apply and adapt from what we learn. And I think that's where we're seeing that AI isn't just the possibility to help us write reviews. It's also something that can really fundamentally change what happens after the reviews. And I think that's where things get really exciting. And so kind of to give just a little bit of an overview of how this plays out and why we think an AI coach, and Nadia specifically, is so well suited to performance management and performance reviews, is Nadia can do the automation of the reviews and synthesize, gather feedback, help managers role play conversations, prepare structured reflections, can help create development plans. But really, it's the last one on these, the ongoing support, that is what an AI coach plugged into a performance management process becomes really powerful, because it's taking all that great information you gather through reviews and feedback conversations and goal setting, and then actively getting that into the flow of people's day-to-day work to shape the small day-to-day moments where they need to apply the feedback. What we really then see is it's an opportunity at every level of the organization to really transform how we're thinking about performance. For individuals, it's a chance to make the process more transparent and efficient, to build more trust and engagement in it rather than making it just a checkbox people have to do, and then giving them tools to really be able to integrate that feedback and grow at a more rapid pace. For managers, it's real support to be able to keep an eye on how they want to be driving performance daily, but also the support to like have harder conversations or more effective feedback conversations. And then finally, and I think this is where it's going to be really great to hear from Brian and Kels and Natalie, is it's really a chance for HR leaders to get a lot more insight across the company into performance and where they need to be focused, like what's going well and what are some of the spots in that organization that can be kind of areas of focus to improve performance. And so I kind of want to go in now and jump into the Delta story with Brian and Natalie. So Brian and Natalie, you began with your pilot with end of year reviews and sort of a small pilot at Delta, and then moved into kind of a global rollout with mid-year reviews. And now we're kind of carrying that momentum back into end of year reviews. So you've sort of been through a full cycle of putting AI coaching at the core of your performance management and performance review process. So I'd love to have you tell a little bit of that story. And to get started, I'd love to have you talk us through kind of what you've done around performance reviews, goal setting, and mid-year check-ins. And let's start with kind of the pilot. How did you first explore and decide, hey, this is the use case we want to pilot on? Why performance management for you?
Yeah, thanks, Das. I appreciate it. Uh, I've been involved in this world for a really long time. And I think it was interesting. Delta's a really unique company because when I joined Delta originally back in 2018, we actually had gotten rid of ratings like a lot of companies back then. And we're trying to sort of work through how do you have enough formality, but also really build that feedback loop is what matters to drive development forward. Then, as many of you probably know, COVID hit Delta in a really unique way. I mean, we struggled to get through it. We basically shut down the organization and started over again. We, hired 40,000 new managers, and we had a really interesting sort of growth time where performance management became less about accountability and much more about well-being. And so we were in this performance management cycle for a couple of years where we're mostly checking in, how you doing? Are you learning? Are you developing? And then we came out of COVID and it was like, okay, right back to accountability, right back to difficult conversations, right back to individual performance. And what we sort of realized was that we needed to give our employees a bit of an extra tool along the way to help them prepare. And I think, Josh, you had said earlier about, the difficulty. I think it was the second pillar about, difficult conversations. And we'd gone so long without having difficult conversations in performance that how do you bring it back? How do you make sure your managers and your employees are prepared for that? So we created all sorts of incredible tools and all sorts of PDFs and PowerPoints. I'm sure everybody on this call has created a million of them, but they weren't getting the traction because in the end, a lot of this is about practice, right? Being a great manager is a lot about practicing a lot of these different pieces. And so it was really interesting because we were trying to find a tool that could engage people, that could help them practice with each other, but in a really safe place. So in the end, for us, it was we saw that performance management wasn't as valuable to our employee population, and we needed it to become even more so because of the number of new managers that we had. We also knew that Delta tends to be a pretty conservative company, and while we're investing in so progressive when it comes to our customers, internally we have to evolve about the way we sort of move our employee population along. So we thought, you know what, let's do a pilot, right? Let's give it a shot. Let's see how this AI coach would work. And we'd, danced with a couple of different AI coaches because we thought it would be a really interesting approach. We said, let's test it a little bit with some safe audiences, with some audiences that be really open to this, and just see if it makes the process easier and allows for the practice to be easier. And it did. And I think that was like the biggest takeaway. We'll talk more about those findings there. And it worked so well that we said, hey, let's stretch it into something else. Let's actually see if people can help with goal setting and adding a little bit more structure to what they're trying to accomplish for the year, as well as Delta's broader strategy. We have a flight plan every year that gets rolled out, but it's hard to often tie individual goals to it. So I think that was a really important piece for us to say, now let's get involved in goal setting. Let's expand it a little bit more, again, in a comfortable audience that they would understand. We haven't really worked with AI that much. And so we went into goal setting, we tested it, we continued to get the right audiences. And then by the time it came around to mid-year, we had so much momentum. And we realized that this is a tool for our broader audience that could really benefit from it. And mid-year for Delta is, again, super unique because mid-year for Delta happens during our busiest time of year, right? Our summer ops are a really difficult time. We want to be focused on getting you guys to where you want to be, not necessarily focus on things like mid-year conversations. So how do we create a tool that's going to make it go faster, that's going to make it easier for the employees, but make sure that we're still checking in? And so Nadia and Valence just provided a great opportunity for us to really get people diving into mid-year and not worrying as much about, well, how am I going to find the time to do it when I'm swamped at the airport and trying to drive the operation forward? So Dawson was really sort of a process along the way that we followed really slowly, understanding our audience, understanding our readiness, and taking it from there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brian. And we're gonna kind of keep moving here. I've got a few questions in the chat, and I think we're gonna get to them and cover them. But just to bring these up, I think people are really curious about sharing what you've seen as like the impact on HR, as well as kind of how you're thinking about measuring that impact. And I think that's something we're going to cover here shortly. So we'll hold those questions, but just to acknowledge we've got those coming in the chat. So I'd actually love, I think, because we've heard a lot about AI pilots. But there's also kind of been a real gap, I think, for a lot of companies of getting from pilot with 500 people to what it means to roll out AI to 14,000 people. Could you talk a little bit about that process? Like, how did it go going from those kind of pilots around end of year into now kind of the global rollout? What did you learn? What worked? And then what were some of the results you saw?
Sure. And I'm enjoying the questions that are coming in because Natalie and I and our teams have had to answer almost every one of those questions across every leadership and other conversation we've had. So I'm hoping we get to cover those throughout. But those are all top of mind and they're perfect questions. It was really important for us to have some great champions in terms of people realizing the value of this, creating great use cases along the way, and meeting the company where it was. Right, like in terms of when we go meet with our tech ops group, there might be a readiness for this that looks a little bit different than our finance group. And so a lot of it was us and our team spending time with them, making sure they understood how to use it, what are the use cases, and especially the guardrails, right? The other thing we layered in on that was we love the fact that we can customize it to Delta's core values, to Delta's rules of the road. So when the conversations were happening, it didn't feel like you were just talking to a generic AI. I thought you were talking to somebody that knew Delta. But we were really clear on the guardrail, what you can and can't talk about. What is the right conversation to have with your manager versus an AI, right? And really building in and saying, all right, you want to have a legal conversation. That is not for this. There's a different, way to puck your HRBP. So it was important that we had champions, that we met our teams where they were, and we really spent a lot of time with our folks. The beauty of Nadia is that it kind of sold itself, right? The ratings were great. It was the highest rated HR tool we've ever had, highest NPS we've ever had. We really wanted to get people into the tool to use it. There was an inherent fear initially. And I think the uniqueness of this is that once people got into it and used it and understood the guardrails and types of questions to ask and tested it, really Nadia, along with Copilot, were the first experiences for Delta on this. And so it was really important for us to say, by the way, what do you use Nadia for? And what do you use Copilot for? Right? How do you get really clear on these use cases? And in doing so, when we rolled it out for mid-year, it was just another tool to help with the conversation, but it didn't replace the conversation. And so it was a really thoughtful process that we followed along the way in partnership with Daniel and the Valence team, but all of our leaders and bringing them into this.
Great. And we've got so many questions coming in. I'm actually going to take a little detour from the slides because I want to make sure we get to some of these questions because I think you're right, Brian. We've got some good ones coming in. And Kelson, even though I know we haven't jumped in a lot on the experience story, please feel free to weigh in as well because I think these are really directed to everyone. But Joaquin was really curious about how people integrated Nadia into a talent strategy framework. And I think you talked a little bit about this, but want to just double click anything to add about how you've really focused on integrating Nadia into your kind of broader framework for talent strategy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of pieces to this. So, individual performance is a direct linkage into our talent strategy, right? Performance and potential, when you think about a 9-box, Delta has a 12-box. So helping really understand clarity around what good looks like, helping understand, am I achieving my goals? Where are my gaps to my goals? Because when I think about our talent strategy, a lot of it is around what development are we providing to people to ensure we're meeting them where they are. So what we could do, and I think there's a slide later on that we'll get to, and Nat may want to jump on this as well, is we were able to actually tell what are those key areas that are getting in the way of achieving our goals. And then in doing so, figure out how do we upskill people to get there? How do we give them the tools necessary to do that? And I think that's the really big piece was when you create development tied to a need, it becomes a lot more valuable than if you just kind of make it more generically. And so if we knew the time management was a challenge, we would spend more time on those skill builders that our partners in L&D would build out. And it was directly tied to what the needs are. So that was specifically when we thought about our talent strategy, it was the right development for the right people at the right time, not just generic. I think that's what our employees were looking for.
Great.
Yeah.
And Natalie, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to add to that, but then I know there was also, I think the slide up here really ties well to that ROI and impact question as well. But what I was going to say related to talent strategy is something that's been really important for us is really figuring out how to differentiate what is the value that Nadia brings versus some of our other AI tools. A lot of times what I equate this to is when You had all of your Microsoft products that just came out, and probably nobody knew the difference of how to use PowerPoint and Word. And now that's so obvious. But we're really facing that internally right now, where if you think about, we have an instance of Copilot internally, we have a lot of customer facing AI tools, is really figuring out what's that unique value that Nadia brings, and then going through all of the different initiatives and strategies under that talent strategy umbrella and figuring out where can we use Nadia, knowing what it's really good at, to supplement that. And so as we think about 2026 and beyond, performance management, as Brian talked to, was a really glaring opportunity for us. But now it's how do we look across to some of our other talent strategies and initiatives and say, where can we fit Nadia into that as well? I don't know, Joss, if you wanted me to jump, just because we have this slide up, I can talk a little bit about just the impact and insights. Just at a high level, what I would say is the first thing that we always do is really start to measure engagement and satisfaction. Are people actually using the tool, and are they excited about it? Because we can't really get into that next level until we know that people are actually spending time and want to spend time in the tool. And so we already know that, which is great. But a lot of the other benefits that we're seeing beyond just knowing people are enjoying using the tool and that they are getting value out of it is just all of the great insights that we are getting from the back end of Nadia. A lot of times when people fill out these performance forms, we only know the output, but we don't know all of the thought process that went into getting to that output. And that's where I really believe that Nadia is bringing a lot of that value. And so looking at the slide that we have up here, what we now know that we probably knew, and I say that in quotations, but we didn't have data to back up some of these findings, is we know that the biggest reason that people are not meeting their goals every year or having challenges meeting goals is because of time management and resource constraints. And so what now we have this insights, we can act on that and said, what can we do from an HR perspective, from a talent perspective, to make sure that we can address some of these constraints that we know our employees have, so we can make it easier for them to meet their goals in the future. And I know this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of a lot of the insights that we've been able to gain from the Valence team over time. But a lot of it is really in the back end of, we have a lot more rich data now than we ever did before.
Great. And I know we've got a lot of questions coming in on some of the guardrails and some of the impact, but I actually want to get Kelson in and kind of lay and start to weave in the Experian story a bit here. Because part of the reason we wanted to bring both Delta and Experian in to talk about this is that you each started with different moments in the talent cycle. So Kelson, I believe you and your team really started with goal setting in terms of how you were piloting and rolling out Nadia for performance management. So I'd love to have you just like kind of quickly touch on the how you've brought about like integrating AI coaching in for goal setting, and how you're thinking of performance management to kind of answer your own answer to this question of how you've integrated this into your broader talent strategy. And then we're going to get to the impact for both of you.
Yeah, let's do it. And I think this connects with your comments on the performance enablements. Because I think what we have been realizing during these last years is that it all comes to how you enable and you drive performance. And basically what we were doing at Experian, or what we have done in the past few months, was kind of looking at all the data that we have from employee surveys, talking to employees, focus groups, and individual conversations with individual contributors, with leaders, etc. And we identified a few opportunities that would help us to raise the bar on performance, that would help us to enable better or greater performance or levels of performance. And so one of the key one, when we talk to our employees, they were basically telling us, like, I know that goal setting or goals are important too for us to achieve clarity, but it is boring to do. Like, it takes time. Sometimes it is difficult. I need to talk to a lot of people if I really want to make this really aligned to the business priorities. Sometimes I will have to look at like our intranet and understand or join many webinars to understand everything about our strategy, etc. But we do see that this is important. Can you make it easier? Because at the end of the day, I want to work on things that really matter, and we all do. Like we all want to do something that really matters. So they were telling us, I really want to strengthen the connection between what I'm doing individually and the business priorities. Can you help me to make it easier? So that's why we were already piloting Nadia for leadership development. And then we had this idea, okay, why can't, could we use Nadia to help make it easier? Could we use Nadia to help employees to improve their goal setting, to connect their individual goals with the business OKRs, with the business strategy, making that much easier? And then after they set their goals, could we use Nadia to help them to plan next steps, actions, etc.? And that's why we started with goal setting, because clarity about the direction and how we connect individual performance, individual goals with the business OKRs or business priorities was one of the key elements that we identified that could help us to drive high performance at Experian.
Wonderful. And I think this was a kind of a good answer to kind of a question that came in from Melissa here of like expanding a bit on how Nadia and an AI coach helps to connect individual goals. And I think to kind of the broader, I think in this case, the Delta flight plan or Experian's kind of broader business goals. And there was a question here on like, what was the impact you've kind of seen on quality goal setting? I think you just spoke a bit to that, Kelson, but Brian and Natalie, anything you'd want to add, or Kelson, anything you'd want to go a little deeper on?
But perhaps just adding something else, that is the engagement with the process of setting goals as well. I think this is a good leading indicator, because if we have a better engagement, we are also measuring obviously the NPS and the satisfaction with Nadia itself. But if we have better engagement and we are also able to identify that or to see that these goals are better connected with our business priorities, this is a really good leading indicator to our ability to focus on the things that matter the most, because this is one of the reasons why we set goals, to help drive focus. So I think this is one of the things, and we had our best year ever in terms of the engagement with the process. And this number is, the update is almost like 90% compared to our record high. And at Experian, we don't say to people like this is mandatory. We try to use mandatory only for those things that are like life or death things. But like we achieved our record high level of goal setting so far, and the year has not finished. Our fiscal year ends at March next year. So I think this is a leading indicator.
Great answer. And I want to go now because we've talked a lot about the positives, and obviously there's a lot of questions people have, and I think trust is so important, as well as some of the guardrails I think you talked about, Brian. So James Russell had a question here for the panel. Is there a danger that rolling out an AI coach detracts from manager to team members having candid conversations? And how have you kind of navigated or drawn those lines for here's how we really use this to empower managers without it kind of replacing their role? Like, how have you made it more augmentative?
Yeah, I can start there. And this seems to be, I think it's a popular question, right? And it's one that's on all of our minds as HR professionals specifically. I would say we haven't really seen that concern yet at large. And because as you're interacting with the Nadia platform, it can help you prepare for that conversation. But a lot of times there's things that we actually need from the manager, right, that a tool can't do. And so where the value has been is how do we supplement and help people prepare for those difficult conversations? And by and large, that is a skill that you have to develop over time. And before having a tool like this, you really don't have a safe space to practice. Maybe you can find a peer to have that conversation with, but having something on demand to say, the end goal here is still that you have that conversation with your manager, but here's ways that you can prepare for it so you feel more comfortable and you might have more confidence to go out and have that conversation. Where we have seen some concerns is specifically about how do we make sure that people aren't saying things to Nadia that could have legal implications, that could, fringe on the territory where they would need to talk to an HR business partner or a manager. And that's where Valence does a really good job of setting up guardrails. And so we've had a lot of conversations with our legal teams where Nadia will bring up a message and will say, this is a conversation that you have to go to your HR business partner on. And so that is really clear. Of course, there are many things that no matter what, it is inappropriate to have that conversation with an AI coach. But just being really clear within your organization and having those guardrails set up, that's what has given our legal team confidence in this tool, but I think also has given us as performance and HR professionals the confidence to say this is really about helping people have better conversations, not replacing those conversations.
Wonderful.
If I could just add something, because I think that last sentence is so spot on. I think you have to meet, I've said this a couple of times, you have to meet people where they are, right? And so Delta is a super diverse workforce. And as I'm Gen X, right? And so how I interact with AI, my comfort level with AI versus, we've got our folks in our tech ops group, we have folks in our marketing, everybody interacts with a little bit differently. So it's the constant reminder to say, this is to help you with your conversation. This is not to replace, right? Great managers are still having those conversations with their people. And so just reminding them, but also understanding that there is going to be a level of concern in general. We've heard the feedback. We've heard this is going to make it easier for my bad managers to get better. And I'm like, but that's the point, right? And so you have sort of an interesting nuance where you never want to disregard the opinions of folks come out. And we're not just forcing it on them and saying, I think, Kelson, you said this about like it's mandatory. Like in the end, use it if it's more valuable for you. Use it if it helps. Use it if there's gaps. And then we'll go from there. And I think that's where it was really important for us. If we had just forced it on everybody and said, time to use AI, it never would have been as successful.
Absolutely. There's something about focusing on the outcome that you're expecting. If the outcome is to have better conversations that will drive better performance, for example, I think this is what we are focusing on. And then people will realize that by using Nadia or using Nadia, what they can do is prepare for being better at doing that. And they understand like the ultimate goal is not like having everyone to use a tool or another or anything like that. It's how we use all of these tools to help us to achieve an outcome that is, in this case, achieve better performance.
Wonderful. And I kind of want to go because we have a few questions coming in, I think around trust, and then also just how you then built the context and what sort of documentation and how you got the right information into the coach. So let's stay a little bit longer on this question of kind of trust and guardrails. Ashley asked, did you have any, I'm sorry, the chat's going so fast. I got to stick with it here. Ashley asked, did you have any hurdles to clear on the quality of Nadia's output? For example, ensuring accurate responses based on internal frameworks and processes, or directing users to other resources when issues needed to be escalated. So I think kind of a question here of how did you structure and set up the guardrails to be confident as HR leaders in rolling out this tool that you weren't taking on unnecessary risk? And open to anybody on this one.
What I would say is it's just lots of testing. And so every time we've rolled out a use case, and it goes to the context question as well, for our performance management process specifically, we uploaded all of our frameworks. Since we have a skills framework, we have our core values, we have behaviors, and then we also have the form itself. There were many, many rounds of testing that we did internally as a team before it was ready to go out to the public and to our employees. So that is how we made sure that we were comfortable, because like any other tool, it has to be refined over time. And I think there are such nuances in your organization that might not show up on just the document, that you really have to be able to provide that feedback. So that was the most important piece, I would say, from a Delta perspective.
Great.
Absolutely. I really resonate that. I think a lot of testing and learning like test it, learn it, improve it, but do something that will help you to learn something from it and improve it. So you will provide more information to Nadia to make it better and understand better your environment as well. But you need to test it, and you need to see what people are telling you about the way they are utilizing it, so you can make it better. And I think we all are as consumers to all of these different Gen AI tools or AI tools, we are also learning that these things are evolving. And I think this is important to mention to people. I think there is some education that all of us are going through right now that is about how we use all of these tools. And people can understand, like they understand that, like this is an evolution. This will be better and better. So if they spot something that okay, this was like not absolutely accurate, like basically they will tell us and we will work on the flow of the conversation or providing more information or a different set of data that will help to make it better. But it's like, it is about testing and learning.
Yeah, and I can't underscore that enough just on our end, through, 70 or so deployments now. One of the leading indicators we really see is the difference between organizations that are just kind of taking off with AI right now and really seeing it drive like new types of work, new workflows, sort of unlocking the impact and the ROI, are those that went the most hands-on, both the leaders, but also just getting in the hands of people and starting to just observe and learn while also navigating and making sure you have the right kind of risk balance. So I've got two questions I kind of want to fold in here that I think have to do with driving adoption. And so one here from Ray Lamb of like, what's been your strategy to get leaders to input their information into the tool so that Nadia is able to build that database that gives it, that has the context to actually help with day-to-day work? So how have you encouraged that? And then I want to add that in with what strategies, this is a question from Jules Karpenko, what strategies have proven the most effective in driving employee adoption and building the trust and confidence? I think these are related. How do you get employees to trust enough? And how do you then encourage them to give the AI coach the context it needs and the understanding to perform?
So I think I can start with that one. I think our logic was to build it into the cyclical processes to drive greater adoption and to ensure that managers and employees were using it more often because there was a thing for it to use, right? The idea of year-end, mid-year goal setting, everybody has to do it. And so where I think we are more trying to think about the future is, how do you build it in non-cyclical processes to ensure people are constantly using it and driving it forward? But our logic was, as this was a new tool for Delta, just new in general, if we started on something people are, when I say required, I mean everybody should be doing a performance review for their people, then more likely people are going to go in there and use it. Now, we saw user spikes aligned with as our cycle moved along. And of course, as you got closer to the end and when you sent emails out around it. So we didn't just sort of hope and pray. We had a pretty thoughtful campaign around pushing it forward to say, okay, when we do performance review cycles, we remind everybody on, let's say it's due December 31st, December 1st, December 8th, December 15th, making sure in that email it says, hey, Nadia is here to help. People are more likely to use it for a cyclical process than just, for example, use it as an internal coach as a starting point. What we always hope is that by starting with that, people get comfortable with it, and then they start using it for everything. And that is what we have found. We have found the people that were using it actively are now using it for other things. And I think that was always the goal for it, and those become our champions.
Yeah, and what I would 100% echo that. I think by nature, we are all deadline focused. And so if you have a reason to use something with a deadline, you're going to be more likely to use it. So one challenge we've had with that approach is some people now think of Nadia as a performance tool, not this broader coach. And so two things that we've done to help with that is, one, we've integrated with Teams. And so we use Microsoft Teams here at Delta. And so just being able to have that instance of Nadia within the flow of work where all of our corporate employees are using Teams all day long, it makes it easier for them to access the platform. And the other thing is we've put pop-ups into some of our HR systems. And so we use SAP SuccessFactors for our performance processes, but then for many other processes as well. And so we've created pop-ups to remind people that we have Nadia and give them some bullet points around how else they can use it besides performance. And so I really do believe, as Brian mentioned, that dual approach of starting adoption with a very specific process that has deadlines, but then trying to implement it in the flow of work to help people see the broader benefit, that's been extremely beneficial for us.
Wonderful. Kelson, anything you'd want to add there?
Yeah, I think maybe replying to another question that I think is related to that, that is like very practical about how do we help people to connect their goals with the business priorities, etc. Basically, what we have done at Experian is to feed Nadia the business OKRs, the objectives, key results, etc. And so when people are using Nadia, basically Nadia will help you to connect with your business unit OKR. So that's how we have done that. And this is how we also help provide the context and the relevance of it, because like it makes it really easy. And we have also trained Nadia on our performance framework and everything. So they don't only go to Nadia to set their goals, but they can use Nadia to understand a bit better about our framework, about key next steps, and all sorts of things related to our process as well.
Wonderful. And we've got a lot of questions coming in here, which is great. And so hopefully I'm getting to a lot of them. If I miss any of your questions in the audience, please feel free to bump them if you feel like we haven't covered it enough. And we'll get to as many as we can here. We have one that got a lot of attention in the chat, a lot of thumbs up. So I'm going to go to this one next. This is from Hunter Saturn. How often are people checking in with Nadia at your organizations? And what does like realistic usage look like? So we've talked a little about driving adoption. How are you thinking about getting into the hands of people and making sure that like they're actually getting value from it? What signals have you been looking for? Both either hard numbers, but also just some of the anecdotes for how people have been using it.
I'll start with it. I don't know how many hard numbers I have, but I would say the most important thing, and Das talked about it in the very beginning, is the ability to remind people. I love getting emails that say, and we've had to tweak this a little bit. Originally, with a lot of emails, and we tweaked it a little bit to say, hey, during our last conversation, you were about to have a conversation with your manager. How'd that go, right? And they're like nice prompted emails, and it kind of gets you to go back in there. I think what we have, Hunter, is a lot of super users. I think we have a lot of people who are using it all the time. They're using it. And now that it's in Teams and it's fully integrated into our workflow, I think we're going to look really closely to understand how that's changed from when it was a send an email or click through, whatever it might look like. So I think we're still looking at it. I think I'd heard some numbers. I think typically we have between, say, 30 and 40% usage, give or take. But for the most part, the reminders are a game changer, especially on people with busy calendars. And I just love the fact that it can remember the last conversation. But again, some people maybe get a little bit nervous about that whole thing. So it's really striking that balance, which we've done by working with the Valence team to say, hey, do we have the right frequency of updates and communications built in? So I think we have a balance of super users, we have a balance of users that use during cyclical processes. And it hasn't typically been a one more thing that falls off. I can tell you that. It has been used multiple times. I think we have specific data on it. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but the reminders really matter.
There's something that I have seen more than one time in some like any call or webinar that we mention Nadia. Like there will be at least one person that will say my BFF, Nadia, which is really interesting. Like, and this is not coming from the project team or HR. So it is the qualitative feedback is also super important. Like when we hear from people how they have been using Nadia, what they're feeling about it. Like the feedback is really rich. In terms of the kind of the relationship that they are building with Nadia, and Nadia reminding them about key things that they said they were going to do, and the nudges and all of these things. So I think this is also something to consider.
Great. We've talked a lot about sort of building trust. We've talked a lot about what you've done to build out kind of adoption. And I think I really want to emphasize, I think, a couple of the themes that have come out, which is the importance of kind of tying it to a moment in time. And I think sometimes what we often will see is that when you give somebody a really powerful tool that's something completely new from what they've had before, they don't always know exactly what to do with it. And by tying it to these specific moments, you start to build people's confidence. They start to see that immediate value. And you again realize, like, you might start with goal setting, you might start with reviews, and then you can expand to performance management. But I think something, Natalie, I believe you said that was really interesting is it doesn't just stop there. And then you can start giving people, here's other ways you can use it. Here's how you can apply it to like skills-based learning. Here's how you can apply it to a lot of, change management, a lot of other use cases. And so I think that, what you highlighted there is like a lot of people do become kind of quickly power users, but it's really, you have to get them started on that journey. And I think that's a lot of, at least what my takeaways from that part was. As we kind of get into the last quarter of the webinar, I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about sort of the impact and the ROI, because we've talked a little bit about the individual level, the manager level, but for you and your teams, we had a question, and I'm sorry it came in earlier in the chat, so I lost the name now, about what the impact has been on your teams and on the HR teams, what it's given you. And then a sort of related question from Joaquin Cruz of, what learnings did you have in the first year of deploying Nadia? And then how is that kind of informing your approach going forward? And then from there, we're going to get into some of the deep impact and ROI to close out. Open to who wants to start. Kelson, I know you've always kind of, and you want to start on this one. What's been the impact on your team, and what have you learned, and where are you headed?
Yeah, I think we are in our first year. We have released Nadia to all employees 6 months ago. As I mentioned, prior to that, we were already using it for leadership developments and leadership coaching. But what we have seen, and I mentioned one of the leading indicators, that is the engagement with goal setting. I think this is a leading indicator. There are a few others that we are measuring, such as how many employees are telling that they understand the business priorities. So this is another measure that we are using. And all of these are usually we see correlation between like engagement, clarity in terms of the direction and goals, leadership effectiveness, all of these things, and business results. All of these things are proven to be correlated, and this is what we are trying to do. So for example, in our last pulse survey, what we try to do is to identify, although this has started like recently, we already measured and compared the results, comparing Nadia users and those who have not used Nadia, and we saw an increase or difference in terms of the number or their favorability to the statement. I understand how my individual goals connect with the business priorities. So these are some of the measures. And I think in terms of the learnings, I think a learning to me is like show it to people and learn. Test it and learn. And this is interesting, because every time we are implementing a new tool, we are used to like big projects that will take many years for us to implement, because we want to guarantee that everything will work perfectly. And what we saw, and then we train people and we invest a lot of time in preparing people to use it. And we tested the education approach with people as well. Basically, we invited some of our employees and said, like, this is Nadia. This is what Nadia can do for you. What is the best way to prepare you to use it? And they said, like, this is very easy to use. This is very simple. Like, I don't need you to invite me to another HR webinar to tell me about how to use it. So one of the learnings is also like, this is kind of getting embedded into our lives as consumers as well. And it is easy, and we need to start doing it and receiving and getting some feedback, iterating it if needed. And that's it. So I think the learning to me is like, we don't have to be overly concerned or stressed about how we are going to do it. Let's start it with a small team if needed, learn from that, and scale that up.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelson. Brian and Natalie, how about you? What's been the impact on some of your teams and sort of the big learnings as you've gone through this past year?
I can start, then I'll hand it over to Nat. I believe very similar to what Kelson said. I mean, I think a lot of what we're going to be measuring our next engagement survey, we are going to try to do, we're going to make sure we do a comparison to say Nadia users, super users, the groups, and understand the growth of it, right? Like ROI is a tricky sort of measure in general for many learning and performance programs. But I think for us, it's really important that we are focusing on the groups that are our biggest priorities as well, right? At Delta, it's our frontline leaders, right? Those who support our flight attendants, our gate agents, the people you see at the airport every day. How are we ensuring that Nadia and an AI coach are benefiting them? And are we going to see it in the engagement scores as they come? And so that ROI will sort of prove itself. We certainly believe that will be the case. But we are making sure we're using it on the company's biggest priorities. Accountability is that, making sure that we're embedding it into everything that we do around accountability. And lessons learned, Kelson, I really like what you said about, we did a bunch of webinars early on, and Daniel and team were amazing to be able to come on and present. And it took like 5 seconds. And everybody's like, awesome, cool, let me go play with it. And we were like, well, we have all this other time left to go through it all. And then like people just go off and do it. And so while we did a ton of change, and as we hope to grow even bigger, we will have to do that. You got to get people in there using it. And once you do that, it can speak for itself. So
wonderful.
Nat,
well,
Nat may have a couple also.
Oh, yeah, please get in. I want to make sure we get a chance to talk through some of the amazing, like kind of what the insights are that you all have gleaned from this and some of the impact. So Natalie, go ahead.
Sure. I will be quick because I think most of it was said already. We've really only been live with all of our corporate employees for 5 months now. And so I do think a lot of what we've seen so far are early indicators that are really strong. And as Brian said, there's a lot that we can measure more specifically in 2026. But similar to what Kelson said, we had our highest completion rates of our mid-year and hopefully with our year end coming up as well that we have in the past. And so I think that's a good indicator. There's also, I think it was somewhere in the deck that we didn't get to today, but there was one comment specifically. So it was on the page that showed the actual quotes from our Delta employees. But if you look under number 1, the last quote here says, less time spent on mid-year and end of year performance when I have 18 employees is a lifesaver. And so that to us is that early indicator of impact, because as Brian mentioned, a big portion of our organization is frontline, and many of our frontline leaders have 30, 40, 50, 60 employees. And so in the past, what I can tell you is, yes, maybe a lot of them were doing these, but a lot of them were probably not doing them well, right? They were going and they were saying, let me find 10 minutes, let me get out the main points, probably forgetting a lot of things. And so the fact that we have leaders that have such a big population of employees under them that are saying, I'm using Nadia, and not only is it driving efficiency, but now they can actually take the time to have more effective conversations, but do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's a time suck, because our managers, especially in the operation, many of you might have traveled for Thanksgiving and seen our operation front and center and seen how busy it could get, that is going to take priority. And so we want to make sure we can make these other processes that support them and their employees as easy as possible, but not, and make sure that we're not losing the value and the quality of the process as we go.
I love that. And I just want to call out, because I think there's something really powerful there. Like ROI and impact for, an AI can be hard beyond time savings and kind of productivity and efficiency gains. But there is a really big unlock. And I think sometimes the first signals we get are quotes like this. They're the anecdotes where you see, wow, this really transformed something for an individual. And you can start to extrapolate at scale. And then the lagging indicators will sometimes be what you can actually then see and quantify in, oh, look, the quality of our goal setting went up. You might not know that till 2 months after, but you can kind of see it in those initial anecdotes and in quotes like this. I wanted to take a moment to kind of go to some of the insights that you all and your teams were able to gain from having this AI coach. And I think there's been a couple of great questions that I think we've covered in the chat. around the privacy and the confidentiality, because we do preserve all privacy and confidentiality in rolling up these insights. So they're all kind of aggregate level insights. But I want to give people a sense of what you all are able to take from having kind of everybody using an AI coach for these. So Brian and Natalie, to start with you, we've had this slide up a few times, but I'd love to give you a chance to kind of talk to, what have been some of the insights you've been able to have back from this, and then how is that informing what you're doing going forward?
Yeah, I can jump in and talk about this slide. And similar to the slide before, I do think the value that we are getting as a team with Nadia is that we actually can understand people's thought processes and not just the output that we would typically see in a form. And so what this slide shows here, these are our core skills. And so at Delta, we have a set of core skills for our leaders and another set of core skills for our individual contributors. And so Nadia was able through all of the conversations. And so of course, a big portion of that came from our performance management process, but it also could come from any of the other conversations that our employees were having. Nadia was able to say, what skills are people talking about? And is that a strength or an opportunity? So this is a really, really good assessment. We have other data points that we look at internally at Delta as well, where we can glean some of this information. But this is a good validation point to say, is all of the other data that we're looking the same as this? And then how can we build plans? And so something that I could see us using this data for in 2026 is handing this off to our learning and development teams and saying, hey, if you look at some of this data, and it's good numbers, right? We have over 800 people that we were able to glean a communication skill from. We can say we really need to dive into more specific development across the enterprise on this specific skill. Can you help us do that? And then we can go to the business and said, we're doing this based on something that is evidence and data approach, not just our feelings, right, of what somebody might need to develop. And so I think the name of the game across the board for HR is having more data. It's something that we haven't always been known to be good at, not at Delta, but just in general as an HR function, right? So I think just as many platforms and ways that we can gain insights that are evidence-based and that could really come from the minds of our employees, the better.
Wonderful. And I want to, Kelson, give you a chance to talk really quickly, and I'm clicking through here to some of what, we have a few in here. We won't get to touch on them all, but a little bit of like what you've been able to glean at Experian from the goal setting process and kind of how you're using that going forward.
Yeah, I think there are many, many very great data that we can get and learn from utilization. I think one of them is related to the blind spots. And also the skills that people they are trying to learn as they go through the experience with Nadia as well. And I think what is great about that is that then we can use that to strengthen the connections between many of our initiatives in the talents related to our talent strategy. And I think we had a question about that. So this also helps us to identify topics, themes, blind spots, skills needs, that we could connect, that could help us to connect with other initiatives in the organization, like such as leadership development or the curriculum of any learning activity, or even like how we are preparing or partnering with our business leaders to reinforce some of the key skills that will help us to thrive and to achieve success. So I think these are I think the experience is really similar to what Natalie just mentioned, but I think we need to use this knowledge to help us to reinforce and connect all of these things, because from a employee perspective, to them, like all of these things are kind of connecting or should be connecting. To us, like we see things like this is performance, this is leadership, this is learning, etc. But for our employees, it's all about their growth, careers, development, and so on. So yeah.
Kelson, I think that's the perfect note for us to end on. So you've nailed it here. I I want to first of all thank Brian, Kelson, Natalie. Thank you so much for kind of just the generosity with both your time and sharing what you've learned along the way here. We're all kind of in this. It's a brand new world as these tools come onto the scene and as we figure out what to do with them. And so this sort of knowledge sharing is invaluable. And a huge thank you to those of you in the chat. It was always so much more fun to be getting questions live. And while I know we jumped around a lot, just thank you. This was a ton of fun for me. And I hope for all of you. If you are interested in booking a demo or looking more, you can find that on valence.co. And we would love to talk to you more. So with that, everybody have a great day, and we'll see you on the next webinar.